Good morning to you. It is Thursday, July 11th at 10:30 a.m. Hope you're doing well. Once again, YouTube is acting ridiculous, so I have a monitor that's paused. Let me know if you come on, if everything looks good on your end. I'd appreciate it. Purdue finally released the football uniforms. I think they did it in a pretty simple way, not too much fanfare. It dragged out process of getting to this point, obviously. But they do have new football uniforms, and I want to break down the release of those uniforms, how it went. Thank you, Ted. So before I do it, thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to Home Field Apparel. Head over to homefieldapparel.com, enter Boiled23 at checkout. Get 15% off your first purchase, or you can find ways around that. I'm sure you're creative. And the other thing is when you're on campus, there's one place to go if you're hungry. If you got the tummy growling, head over to AJ's, head towards the fire station, and then you'll just smell it, and your nose will guide you there like the old cartoons. And then you'll go inside, and you'll have something delicious, and you'll have a great staff, and maybe Adam and Jake will actually help you. Who knows? It's a pretty great place. EatAJs.com. So Purdue, I wanted to break down the whole thing. There hasn't been a lot of Purdue football information out there. Thank you to everybody who's telling me everything looks good on their end. Good. Appreciate it. But it took a while to get here, to get the uniforms released. Teddy Huff, who is Boiler Uniforms on Twitter, who's a former BS writer back in the old days. He did a really good mock-up a couple days ago. Really good mock-up. I think he and I were in lockstep on what we wanted to see. I loved what he did. And then he put his thoughts out. He's kind of the resident Purdue football uniform expert. It's a big hobby for him. He does a really good job. He and I were close on what we thought this would be. But we weren't quite right. We were right about one thing. We thought stripes would be important, but they're important for a different reason. We both wanted to see really, really bold, large stripes like in the 80s. Instead, Purdue gets a very, very retro, to me, retro. I call this a retro pro style football uniform. And if you want, I can expound a bit on this. I looked at what's happening in the NFL right now and the release in the last 2 years. Here's some of the teams that have many stripes. You got the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Niners, the Browns, the Lions, the Packers, the new look, old look Bears, the retro Bears. I think they have 3 stripes with 2 negative spaces, and then they have smaller stripes. They have actually 6, 7, 8 stripes if you really want to break it down on their sleeves, along with the Hallis reference. And then the retro Saints uniforms. I think these, to me, are closest to that. Obviously, the color tie-in. But if you want to go a step further into this, look at Baylor's uniforms. They released theirs in 2024. They're a lot like Purdue's. Their stripe formation is very, very similar to Purdue's, but they have no stripes on their helmet. One thing that Teddy and I both agree on, they did a really good job, in my opinion, unifying the uniform. So it's actually designed, meaning the stripe formation, which is 3 positive stripes, 2 negative, meaning whatever substrate material shows through. They did that consistently. So a 5 stripe is on the helmet, it's on the sleeves, and it's on the pants. I like it. I don't think it's horrible. We've seen bad uniforms as Purdue fans. We've seen good uniforms. We still, my first wish whenever there are uniforms announced, I don't care if it's retro basketball, new football, whatever, I always want to see old gold, the real old gold, and we're not going to get it. Purdue and Nike are in their partnership in this. Vegas gold is something that Nike wants to force down everybody's throat because it's easy to do the same metallic golds or quasi-metallic golds, and Purdue is part of that family. Wake Forest, Vanderbilt, other teams that are in that. But that's not really Purdue's colors. I know they changed the corporate book. They did it back in the 90s to unify things because there was goldenrod and all this stuff back then, if you want to get really nerdy like I like to on this stuff. But when Bob Bernard was hired, that was his task, to unify the golds and to make the uniforms and the logos look uniform, and they did it. And the Vegas gold thing back then, it was the first foray into that. And over the next decade or so, 15 years, they made Vegas gold the Purdue official color. That said, I think old heads like myself, people that grew up Purdue fans, really still a lot, or most of us, really like the old gold because we think that's what Purdue is. That Purdue is, it's in the fight song, for the love of God. But people that are younger, like the Vegas gold, I have never liked how it looks in as a jersey or pants, because I always call it piss gold. It's a khaki color at best. It's muted. It's not strong. It doesn't look like, to me, it doesn't look like real gold. That's where it comes from. If you look, a gold bar is old gold, is a deeper, richer gold. And that's what I wanted to see. Well, we didn't get that again. And that's not a surprise. I think it's not a surprise to anybody. But what we got is pretty good. Like I said, I think it's a clean look. I think it's in line with trends. A lot of people out there, I went on and I reviewed some of the feedback on Twitter, some people that aren't Purdue people. What did they think about the Purdue uniform release? And generally people like it, but there's an overwhelming theme of people saying it's the same as everybody else's uniform. I don't really agree with that. But what you have happening, okay, you have Nike supplying so many of the jerseys and the shoes and the jerseys and uniforms in college sports and in pro sports. It's not just college. It's college, pro, it's high school. Big high schools have big uniform reveals now. But you realize that the corporatization of uniforms and why these things all look the same, there's a couple reasons. Number one, Nike doesn't want to take any risks and have something not sell. That's a big deal, right? So when you look at this, Nike looks at the bottom line, and they've had a horrible year. If you don't know anything about Nike, they had a 32% drop in their stock. I can get into reasons why I think that's happening, but I'm not going to today because it's a much, much bigger issue than just the design of uniforms. Nike has done a very poor job managing their people. They've done a very poor job managing their forward face, their messaging. They have done a poor job developing true performance product. And they were a company that was known for innovation, and they don't innovate anymore. But even I can dig in deeper in this. I could talk about that for 25 minutes, but I'm not going to today. But what I'm going to say is that when you have one supplier, or really three suppliers, right? So you have Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour, who are in charge for what? 95% of the uniforms in college football and pro football. Nike has the contract for the NFL. You see Jordan stuff popping up every now and again. Which is Nike as well. But what you're getting is the same hopper, the same pool of designers, the same pool of people that give thumbs up and thumbs down. And as a result, you're going to see the same product, okay? What Purdue got, in my opinion, is something that's, I think some people are saying this is super unique. It's not super unique, but it's new for Purdue, okay? If you go back and look at where this comes from, what I was hoping for was a tip of the cap, a retro version of the 80s, okay? They didn't get that. What they got is kind of a 60s, 70s multi-stripe look, a retro pro-style uniform. Again, it is not bad, in my opinion. The one thing they missed on, the numbers and the word Purdue are too low on the uniform. They can raise that up. They can get that better. I know there are things with the construction of the jersey that prohibit some of that, but that's a little low. It's not horrible. It's a little low. It might look bad for the fans when they buy one of these really, really expensive real Nike jerseys from the bookstore. Might look bad there. I don't know how it's going to look on different shaped players, bigger guys, smaller guys, whatever. I think it's a sharp uniform, though. And I think, here's the thing. There are a lot of you out there, some of you who are watching probably aren't this guy, because you'd say, okay, it's a QuickCast based on the uniform reveal. I don't give a damn. And my older brother's one of these people who say, I don't care about uniform, didn't win the game. Yeah, okay, you're a tough guy. Here's the thing I could counter that with, okay? When Tiller was Purdue's head coach, Purdue won a lot of football games. Not sure if you know that. You do know that if you're watching this. But during the Tiller era, they had some of the worst Purdue football uniforms we've ever had. The white with the gold numbers were illegible. You couldn't tell who was on the field. That's a problem. The fact that they used that gold so much, it was everywhere. They had an all gold, which looked awful. They had a white that looked really bad. They had a really good white, I mean, white uniform, white jersey, white pant. that looked pretty good. They worked for one game versus Michigan. They got their clocks cleaned in Ann Arbor. I was at that game. It was rainy. You could see through the pants, almost like what happened with the MLB uniforms this year. Really a bad misstep because it was a very rainy day. Purdue played horribly, and so never see those uniforms again. But we've seen bad uniforms on winning teams, and it didn't make us feel any better about the uniforms. It wasn't like you're like, wow, those good old days. Let's go back there. What people say the Tiller era uniforms are actually the ones that were the first uniform. If you want to dig in even deeper and get even nerdier, those are the Wyoming uniforms. Those are the same uniform that Joe Tiller brought from Wyoming with one exception. Wyoming uniforms said Wyoming on the front. Tiller got rid of that, put a train here. They were supplied by Champion back then, not Nike. And the uniform, though, the font is the same. It's more of a soccer style block font. But he took them straight from Wyoming. Even the broad stripes on the sleeve, they're from Wyoming. That's the funny thing. And I think people think that's the Tiller era uniform. Well, that's part of the Tiller era uniform. That's the Rose Bowl Drew Brees era uniform. The next era, the Brandon, Hance, Kirsch, and Orton jersey, the one after that, there were bad uniforms. This is my whole point. There were bad uniforms, and Purdue was still winning. And I don't think everybody just ignored it. In fact, I ignored it so little. I did a T-shirt campaign of them bringing back black jerseys because I thought Purdue, to me, at home, black jerseys, gold pants, gold lids. That's Purdue, right? White numerals, gold outline. That's Purdue again. Well, guess what they did? Black jerseys, gold pants, gold outline, gold lids. That's what they're doing this year. But they changed it just a little bit. It's a different style jersey for Purdue. I think it's a new style. Teddy could talk about that. I don't get into that stuff. I don't get that far in the weeds. I know we're way in the weeds already. But the stripe configuration, that's different. And it's organized. It's well designed. It's thoughtful. I'm all good with this. So that's why I'm saying it's sharp. It's not a mistake. We could have done better, could have done worse. But I think these are good. Okay, back to the Nike thing. Will they sell jerseys? Probably. I think these will probably sell. I think kids will like them. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about, is recruits and the younger consumer. It's not about us. I hate to say this. It's not about a 49-year-old guy doing a podcast, even though the people here, the guys and girls that are watching, you guys are kind of the bedrock of Purdue sports. You're the ticket holders. You're the people that give money. But really, the uniform changes comes down to younger consumers and recruits, okay? We saw two reveals. We saw a black, gold, or gold, black, gold, right? We saw black, white, black lids, white jerseys, white pants. I like both of them. I think they're both solid. I think they both look like Purdue. I love the white look. I think they're great. I think they got rid of, okay, so here, let's go dig even deeper. What did Purdue lose with this uniform redesign? Okay, they lost the cow catcher on the shoulder. And that was something that really made Purdue uniforms unique. Nobody did that in America, period. Nobody did it. They also lost the two-tone shoulder, which was not all the time, but we saw it. It would pop up a couple times a season where, for instance, the anthracite and gray and black, three tones of gray and a little bit of gold. Hated that uniform. It was dog meat. By the way, Purdue won games in that again. For the purist crowd who says, just win, baby. Those were horrible uniforms, and they were not anything like what Purdue should look like. They weren't Purdue's colors. They were dog meat, dog water, whatever you want to say. Purdue won in them, and I wanted them out of there, okay? So those were crap, and they're gone, thank goodness. Purdue lost the train track stripe down the helmet. Interesting story on the train track stripe. If you don't know it, a student originally designed it. This is back in a darker era for the athletic department, in my opinion, meaning they did things the wrong way a lot of the time, okay? And one of the things they did wrong was they stole a student drawing of a train track stripe. I actually was big about putting uniform designs on gold and black back then. Clever name. Boiler Dowd was my name on the gold and black board back then. But I put the train track there, and I put it down the sides of a uniform one time I put it down the middle, and I would do Illustrator mock-ups. I work in design. I can do that pretty easily, as could anybody who has any of that skill. But a student designed a helmet with a track that foreshortened. It came to a vanishing point, right? And then it showed up on the field one year. And Purdue didn't ask Permission from the kid who designed it, the Purdue student. He wasn't horribly angry. He didn't want to press charges. He didn't want to get lawyers involved. He could have. He was well within his rights because he had released them on a Purdue board. I believe he released on gold and black. And then they showed up on the field. And Purdue, how they thanked him, he went to him and said, "Hey, what the heck, guys? What are you doing?" And they gave him a helmet. So he got a helmet with his design on it that they had stolen. So a little trivia there. But that train track, a lot of Purdue fans like it because it's unique, because it's Purdue. But in my opinion, that had kind of run its course. And so here's the thing about all this. Purdue's uniforms hadn't been changed since 2026. That's a long time. That's an eternity in fashion, quote unquote fashion, sportswear fashion, uniform fashion. A lot of teams turn over their uniforms quickly. Purdue did not turn over them enough because Purdue was not a high enough priority to Nike. They couldn't get the deal from Nike to turn them over, meaning Purdue would have had to foot the bill, and Purdue is cheap as an athletic department historically, even from the transition from Burke to Babinski. That has stuck around, kind of. I know Purdue's spending more on facilities, doing a really good job on a lot of stuff. But historically, Purdue is cheap. The trustees are cheap. They're like, why would we get rid of this? These uniforms are fine. Because Nike said, we're not paying for them for you. And the reason Nike doesn't want to pay for Purdue to get upgrades every couple of years like they do the higher priority schools, they don't want to do a big Nike release, is because Purdue doesn't make Nike enough money. This is my whole deal. Years and years ago, Under Armour came to Morgan Burke and said, "We want to make you the priority." Before Northwestern was a big deal. I think at that point, all Under Armour had was Maryland. And the reason they have Maryland is because Kevin Plank started Under Armour in Baltimore. And so they wanted to make this is going to be our home base. So they got Maryland first, and then they wanted to they started broadening, kind of peppering through America, trying to find major colleges to partner with. And they wanted Purdue. And Morgan Burke said, "No, we're staying with Nike." And the reason he stayed with Nike, I think, is because there was such a deep root in basketball with Nike. That goes back to Gene Katie getting a campus-wide deal with Nike. Pretty cool stuff. But it would have been lucrative Purdue, and Purdue would have gotten a lot more control of what their uniforms look like. Shortly after, Northwestern came on with Under Armour, okay? And they got that weird sweater-looking jersey, which I thought was kind of cool. But I'm a different guy. Not everybody liked that. And here's the problem. When you say we're going to try to make a unique jersey, like so many fans are saying, this looks cookie cutter, right? Right now, Nike football releases are similar to other Nike football releases, right? They have to fall into a certain shape of the jersey. And because of that, the pattern looks a certain way, shape, the stripes look a certain way. There's a template, a bit of a template. The designers are limited. Everybody's limited, right? But when you go too far outside of that and you try to make something super unique, like Northwestern did. Some people say, that sucks. I hate it, right? I liked it for Northwestern. I'm like, that's a waspy school, right? You've got the college sweater idea being in the jersey. There's a lot of things that felt like it was a good fit for Northwestern. But the big takeaway was Purdue could have had old gold. They could have had their real colors, and they could have had a lot of uniqueness. But we didn't get it because it's stuck with Nike. Okay, that's something I want to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about was Minnesota is another team that had a uniform reveal in the Big Ten this year. Their stripes are similar to Purdue's. Their uniforms, to me, aren't completely designed, meaning they don't have the stripes going the same helmet, sleeve, and pants. What they did is their sleeve and pants are the same. They're the five stripe design or big three design, right? Just like Purdue's. They have two stripes, and then they have the negative space showing through. The bad thing about Minnesota is their stripes don't match on pants and jerseys if you look on their uniform reveal. But I think a lot of people would say, okay, those are the same. There's that cookie cutter idea again, okay? Let me do a couple other breakdowns, a couple other things that I thought were unique. A lot of people said, oh, look at these. These are just like Colorado's. This is on Twitter. Purdue's uniforms are nothing like Colorado's, I can assure you. Deion Sanders had a very, very specific thing he was trying to do with Colorado uniforms. They are super clean. If you look at them, they've got a single stripe around the band of the arm. They've got a contrast colored collar, and they have no stripes on the pants. That is a very different look. Plus, they're doing a lot of cool things with metallic finishes on their numbers, things like that. Very clean but flashy, if you will. But Purdue and Colorado are nothing alike. This is important to me for two reasons. One, I didn't want two black and gold teams to be the same. You look at Vanderbilt, Purdue's don't look like that. I don't think they look like Wake Forest right now. I haven't seen a Wake Forest reveal this summer. But I tried to find to see if these teams would be exactly the same. Nike has done that before, and that's bad, right? That's why I love the Script Purdue basketball uniform so well. Script is big right now in basketball. That retro era, by the way, that's 60s again. So that it's the same thing. It's affecting football. It's a 60s retro thing affecting football and basketball. But you have Colorado, Purdue, Wake Forest, Vanderbilt, all black and gold Nike schools. And really, there isn't a whole lot of overlap, which is really, really good. Vanderbilt has some unique touches, by the way. If you want to look at something, they do things with the chain and the anchor on their uniforms, and I think they look bad. I think they've had some good ones, but I think generally they're not great. The Colorado tie-in obviously should be noteworthy for all Purdue fans because of Ryan Walters playing at Colorado. So I went back and I looked and said, okay, was Coach Walters influenced at all? He said he talked about all the old uniforms. They put them out on a table and they said, okay, we're going to go forward based on some old looks and some things that they thought were noteworthy. I don't know exactly. I'd like to hear his explanation on the roots of this. But this isn't exactly what I thought they were going. When he said that and Teddy saw this, we both thought Rod Woodson era. I said Jim Everett era. That's just the way I think. But he thought Rod Woodson because of Walters being a defensive back. So if you go back and look at Colorado uniforms from when Coach Walters played at Colorado, I thought maybe there'd be a weird tie-in there. Like maybe they had a retro multi-stripe uniform. They didn't. Colorado's uniforms were very simple when Walter started. They were solid gold pants, and I think very simple jerseys, kind of like the tail end of the Tiller era type thing, or pardon me, the early Tiller uniforms. But then at the end, if you remember the piping era, and I'm getting dorky, I know, and you guys may not have seen this side of me. Maybe some of you don't pay attention. I get into this stuff because of my background in footwear design. But the piping era in football uniforms in the 90s, I thought it was awful. It was where things there would be a thin color popped piping going through the uniform. And when Coach Walters was defensive back at Colorado, they had that color piping, and they had Colorado at kind of like a racing slant font, right? And then they had these panels that kind of swoop through. A lot of people think of West Virginia. Was a team that had this era of uniform, and I think they were bad. The Denver Broncos had a uniform that was similar to this era. Louisville had some like this that were, I just thought they were bad. I just thought that era of uniform was bad. And that's one thing you have to recognize is that fashion is going to play a part in the decision of these uniforms. Very few teams are Penn State and Michigan and Notre Dame, right? And USC. Teams that don't need to change. They don't have to change. Alabama, they just have their way of doing things, and it's freaking badass, and everybody loves it because they have won so many games. Again, the roots of that are tradition, right? A tradition of great football, a tradition of great play on the field. That's why I like the script so much in basketball, because it harkens back to a great era of Purdue basketball. As it turns out, the greater era of Purdue basketball is right now, and they're wearing those uniforms again. And so the good, warm, fuzzy feelings we have with that laundry will tie in even more. That's very, very good. Okay, so I know I'm running long. I could talk about this for 2 hours, but I'm going to talk a little bit more before talking to you guys about the release itself. Some teams have guys come out and they kind of show them off. Purdue has done that in the past in not a very good way, not a very well-produced way. This year, Purdue decided to do something very savvy, very smart. They tied in the EA College Football 25 release with the uniforms. And the reason they had to do this, as Teddy pointed out, the reason they had to do this was because that game is coming out this week, I think. I'm not positive. I'm not a big gamer. But the game's coming out, and in the game, it looks like Purdue is going to have their the new uniform is going to be in there. So they had to have a tie-in. They had to show it before the release. They had to get out in front of that, right? So very clever release. If you haven't seen the video, they've got Coach Walter's son coming into the living room to sit down and play some EA college football, EA Sports College Football 25. And they're picking the uniforms. And one of the sons says, I like the all whites. I'm with him. I like the all-white uniforms. I think they're great. I think they're really, really good looking. I think they look tough. They look clean, whatever. But the funny thing is the whole thing where then they go into the screen, it's actually a real life model in the uniforms, showing the uniforms. And so he goes through that. They click through them. They only show us 2 combos. We talked about that already. And then at the end of the this is a tie-in with me. I think it's funny. At the end of the quick release of the uniforms, after they show the uniforms, they show the player on top of the scoreboard next to the block Purdue, wearing the uniform, just standing still, like a sentry, like a guard. I've been on top of the old scoreboard. And the reason I've been on top of the old scoreboard was a friend of mine who worked for the athletic department. He interned for the athletic department. Every time ABC or ESPN was coming into town back then, because when you had a bigger game, they would have to run different cables for different things. They'd have to bring in different lights because Purdue didn't have lights. But you'd have to run cables up to the top of the scoreboard so that that camera, the eagle eye camera, would have all the power he needed, all the mic things he needed for the producers to communicate, all that. But somebody had to run those cables. So you would go into the bowels of the scoreboard and go up a ladder. It was horrible. I'm very afraid of heights, but I did it because I was getting paid probably a nickel. So you'd throw cables on your shoulder, go up, shimmy up the ladder, and then you'd come out of a portal hatch on top, and you would be above the stadium on a flat roof with no railings. And granted, you're in the middle of it, okay? So you're not like near the edge. But I was scared to death. And the people that know me well know that I got real low because I'm the massive height of 5'4". I tried to get my center of gravity even lower so I wouldn't blow off the stadium. So when I saw the end of the Purdue uniform on top of the new scoreboard, which is taller and bigger, I was like, wow, I would have pooped my pants. But I think the video was really well done. Once again, Purdue creative team. Hats off to you guys. You always bring it. They did a great job. Hats off to Coach Walters and the Nike team who designed it together. I don't know how collaborative that effort is. I believe with somebody like Coach Walters, he'll say, yeah, I really want to be involved in it. So they allow him to be involved in it. That said, they're all in a box with the template they have to use, meaning the uniform cut and the colors that are, obviously Purdue has a palette, a corporate identity palette, color palette. They have to fall in that. You can't bring back old gold, even though Boiler Dowd bitches about it. And I think Purdue did a good job. I think they got a solid product. I think they're going to win some games. Like I said, I think 4 to 6 wins this year would be pretty good with the schedule. I've talked about that over and over. There hasn't been enough to talk about for football, but here we are talking about the uniform. So thank you to all of you who are tuning in live. Pretty decent showing for a early day show. I appreciate it. And thanks for allowing me to vent or to talk a little bit about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. All right. Ted Berkey says, looking handsome. He was telling me I was here. Pharrell Hammers, Jason D, Nathan, all say everything looks good. Good morning to you, Nathan. Ted Berge says, I like the video. The uniforms are good, clean overall, about what I expected. I would have done some things a little bit different. Can't complain. That's the way I feel. Ted sums it up really quickly, and we could call it a show. We could have just said that and just called it a show after 15, 20 seconds. But if you're starved for Purdue content, that's why you come on here. We want to talk a little bit more. Austin Ray says, happy to see something new and refreshed, but kind of meh. On top of the scoreboard was badass, however. Yeah, so this is so much of this is opinion, right? Everything is opinion. And if you're a kid of the 80s and 90s, I was born in 75. If you're a kid who remembers the 80s and 90s well, you remember the change into the 90s when things got really aggressive and really unique. Teams started doing stuff where back then you had a lot of uniform providers. I bet in college basketball specifically, let's think about that. College basketball, I bet you had 20 or 30 uniform providers. It was less regulated. It was Nike hadn't bought up companies and put them out of business. Nike hadn't just run companies out of business. There weren't as many mom and pop shops locally. But if you remember the 90s and basketball uniforms specifically, you remember a lot of character and you remember a lot of bad uniforms. If you want to, I'll give you specific examples. Arkansas and Kentucky, those uniforms were horrible. The tiger scratch claws, they had a gradation one. Kentucky had one called blue denim, which was a print that looked like blue jeans on their basketball uniforms. That was a Converse project. Holy crap, was it bad. So you can go too far really quickly. And then you look at the NBA, the New Jersey Nets had a gradation. They had a unitard one-piece shoulder down that snapped like it was like a bike uniform or a wrestling singlet with shorts over the top of it. So you can go bad really quickly. That's all I'm saying. Character is good. I love it. I love it. I love teams taking big swings. You take a big swing, you have a chance of taking a big miss and a big L. And so Purdue did not do that, in my opinion. They did not take the L. Maniacally Steve says, hello, popping in on between meetings. I'm sure he's gone if he's in between meetings. Thanks for stopping in. Greg McManus, my pal, says, why are there a few people on Twitter hating on them? They look clean, crisp, good, nod to the previous area. A lot of people say things, their minds think they think that something's one way. For instance, the Colorado thing, saying Purdue's look just like Colorado. I saw that comment twice. Purdue's don't look like Colorado. They're both black and gold, but they do not look like Colorado. But people hate on things because they hate on things, right? People like to vent because they live frustrated lives, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's a hard thing to make something good enough that everybody loves it. In fact, it never happens. So if you're a sneakerhead, the Air Jordan 1, which has had a modicum of success, I'm told. The Air Jordan 1 was widely hated and it was banned because of the usage of color. That became iconic, right? That shoe is a horrible player shoe, by the way. Even back then, it wasn't great. I know they had air in it, but it didn't make it much better. Offending people to a certain point should be the goal of the designer, in my opinion. Offend a couple. And you got to say, how many are you okay with offending? Because when you do that, you're going to have equal number, if not more, love it, right? And so that's like you look in modern culture right now, the Cybertruck. Some people hate it. Some people love it. If it was, this goes back to the uniform purist guy. If it ran really well and it was awesome and didn't have any technological bugs and was just a stalwart of a vehicle, people would say, yeah, we got to make our version of the Cybertruck, right? But it turns out that thing's had some technical glitches, which have been a problem. So maybe not. Nita Beanverse says, I'm not a design expert by any stretch, but I think they look good. Excellent. Nathan A says, nothing beats the old gold. I want the old gold back. Never going to get it. Ted Berkey says, Greg, some people wanted something completely revolutionary. Can't please everyone. I don't know. Purdue fans are not a completely revolutionary type of people. Let's be real honest. The culture of Purdue is not that. But we do want a refresh every now and again. We do want something that looks clean and fast and athletic and bold, and it looks like Purdue. Here's another one. I was talking about 90s basketball uniforms. Purdue's basketball uniforms when Glenn Robinson was there with the, it looks like the Coca-Cola swoosh, that kind of, the wave, let's call it on there. And Purdue's retroed those. Nike poorly retroed those uniforms. The geometry wasn't quite right. The panels, I think, were printed. They weren't stitched like they were in the old ones. Those uniforms, a lot of people hated those. I like those uniforms. I was on campus when those came out, right? If you look at the color matching was horrible. And the black and gold, the gold was like really bad. And it didn't match the outline, stitched outline around the numerals, and the gold on the black and gold version, they didn't match. That's a problem, right? So just the basics. Get the basics right. Greg Manna says, as we've seen, different enough looking is weird if the product is poor. See tiled numerals. Yeah. You can really quickly make something that looks really bad. And when your team looks embarrassing, that kind of will play into how bad your uniforms are. So I don't think Purdue's going to embarrass anybody, regardless of how good or bad. I just don't get that vibe from this Purdue team. We don't have a coach that's going to take a ton of risks on offense, and you've got a coach on defense who is going to put on a solid product. To me, that could spell like milquetoast product in the long run. That could be the kind of the Jim Coletto formula of failure, which no one likes that. But when you take big risks, there's big reward. The Joe Tiller era, right? On the field. Big play calling, wide open spread offense when nobody else was doing it. That could have failed miserably, but it didn't because Tiller was good at getting guys to execute, and they did. Let's see. Maniacally Steve says, hey, there's content. What's up with Nike? Deep dive with Dad. Yeah, this is a lot of deep dive stuff. If you enjoy it, let me know in the comments. If you don't, Sorry about you. Because I like I said, I could do this all day. I love this stuff. I could talk product, and I love the interaction of it. This side as well. Greg Mann says, I don't believe the product would be poor though. No, I don't either. I'm with you, Greg. He continues. Purdue has a history of using all whites at Michigan stadiums. They wore all white at Spartan Stadium with the white helmet in the driving rain for a near upset. I'm trying to think. So I've been to Michigan State 3 times for games. I've been to Michigan once. And I was in a rainstorm at Michigan State. I was in a rainstorm at Michigan. I can't remember the games. And I can remember Purdue under Brom dropped a really painful game I was in East Lansing. So one of the best games ever, though, in East Lansing I went to was the one where Orton came in. Was that Illinois? That was Illinois. He came in off the bench in Michigan State and at Illinois, and I think led to victories in one of them. Came up short in one, if I'm remembering correctly. Both times that was when Brandon Kirsch was starting. So, okay, Ryan, Michael, Anthony Harrington says, hit the nail on the head perfectly with the Purdue text being a little too low and likely looking weird on a fan, but they are a clean look. I agree. Brian T says, Purdue needs to hire Dowd for design help. Listen, man. I've tried, and that's not a joke. I have tried. I don't know how I could be useful. I'm an old shoe designer. I'm an apparel designer. I've designed bags and soft goods, and I've designed protective equipment, helmets, shoulder pads, gloves, that sort of thing. Football, lacrosse, done a little bit of motorsports, motorcycle racing, that sort of thing, but mostly in team sports. And at my age, it gets harder and harder to look attractive to people, but Purdue Sports doesn't want me on staff. I've tried. Maniacally Steve says, imagine a helmet like Maryland's though. Oh my, well, they've had 2 or 3 versions of the really crazy, strong Maryland flag. One of them was really good. Other people hated it though. What they did is they use a dip process where they take the helmet and they dip it into it's a sheet of print. And whatever touches that sheet sticks to it. So you'll see that'll be warped a little bit around the helmet. But they did one where they dipped the helmet into the Maryland flag. It was a really clean graphic. They did another one later where the dip was like, it had shadow on it and it looked dirty and washed out and it was horrible. So yeah, we can disagree on which one was good or bad, but I liked the one that was big and bold. And then the one after, I hated it. So, Rick McManus says Northwestern's new tagline. He continues, I want to see a waspy school on their literature. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Northwestern, by the way, has still with Under Armour, and they have done some things. We've made fun of it here on this very website, and you have as well. The Old English gold and black uniform, and they say that references a gate on Northwestern's campus. And I'm like, holy moly, is that a reach to make your football uniforms black and gold just because you want to be us? Come on. Maniacally Steve says 60s were a pretty good decade for Purdue football, if I recall correctly. Yeah, they were great. And yeah, if you can do something like the 60s, the truth is though, Purdue's 60s uniforms were really clean and really simple. They just had stitched, so they had black with the gold stitch numbers and white with the, I think they had, I think they had gold at one point and they had white at another time. They kind of mismatched. And then when Phipps came on, they had kind of a mismatched jersey and pant, but they were all very simple. I would argue that the uniforms were replicated already. Purdue replicated that. They had simple 2-stripe down the pants. Was that the end of the Orton era? I would say the end of the Orton era, beginning of the Painter era, or the Painter era. They were very simple, very clean, and they were a tip of the cap to the 60s uniform, I believe. They weren't exactly right, but they were close. That's pretty much Penn State's uniform, right? So, yeah. Let's see. Ted Berkey says, did we let some of the players have input? What do players think? Look good, feel good, play good. I would think that Walters might have talked to a couple guys just to ask them what they think, but I believe Walters had the say here. That's the idea I get. I don't know if we'll get the full story eventually, by the storytellers in the creative department. But we'll see. Let's see. Steve Kendall says, liking the uniform. Excellent. Thank you for being here, Steve. Ted Berkey says, so Steve Kendall is my quasi-uncle, by the way, if you guys don't know that. That's my dad's college roommate. Great man. Glad he tunes into the show. He tried to help warn me when I was talking in silence all year with the buzz a couple weeks ago. Ted Berkey says, sorry about that. Just wondering what the players think. As Dowd alluded, the younger people have an opinion that matters, players and recruits. Yeah. So the market matters, right? So there's going to be a little of this, right? Licking your finger, putting the air and feeling the wind. They want to make sure that you're doing something that kids are going to want to buy and the recruits are going to love. When they come in, they try on those uniforms, which I think is partially not legal anymore. I don't really understand. The NCAA did something, a stupid regulation about players can't come in and have the photo shoot anymore, I don't believe. But then I saw players after that with the photo shoot. So I don't understand that. Let's see. Maniacally Steve says, and with that, 11 o'clock is indeed the next meeting. Love you guys. Good night. Thank you, Steve, for coming. I know hopefully he comes back and tunes in, but that was 10 minutes ago. Ted Berge says, I blocked that entire era from memory. Yeah. Throttle Power says, longtime viewer, first time to comment. Love the story on getting to the top of the scoreboard. Go Boilers. Yeah. Yeah, my buddy was named Chris Ambrose, if you didn't, he's a great guy. But he was a Fort Wayne product. Now he lives up in Minnesota, and he interned with the athletic department for 2 or 3 years. He was as angry and wound up of a fan as I was as a freshman. We hung out together freshman year, sophomore year. I don't think we did much junior year. I think he moved off campus, but I think it was sophomore year. And yeah, maybe I'm wrong about that. So it was freshman, sophomore, junior year. But yeah, he hooked me up with a chance to do something that terrified me. Greg McManus says, Lacrosse. Oh, I need to connect you with some people. Rumor is my school is jumping from Under Armour to Nike, and we'll have to change everything. Greg, let me tell you a story. And fellow boiled sports people out there, I designed the first women's lacrosse goggle. And if you're a lacrosse person, you may know this. Lacrosse goggles weren't a thing. Protection of the eyes, they thought women didn't need it. In fact, the rules were a little different in lacrosse. Women, they didn't allow as much contact and stick contact specifically on the field. And a girl almost lost her eye in the Northeast playing girls lacrosse, women's lacrosse. And so I worked for a company called Cascade as a contractor, and I designed the first women's goggle, which is a frame of wires that sit against the face. They still use a very similar product, but I'm on the patent. So I believe I'm on the patent. And I also designed shells and graphics and face masks for Cascade, Greg. So that may mean something to you. I also designed gloves, shoulder pads, a pad called the Rhino Skin pad for Brine years later. So little dorky stuff. Jim Garfinkel says, just saw the uniform video, didn't see much of the black. I'd like to see more Purdue Pete helmets. Yeah, so I just bought the Purdue Pete helmet, the most recent one, where it's block number on one side when Horvath was playing. I got the number 40 and Pete on the other side. I don't know. I don't know if I love that. I did a mock-up, if you saw the Purdue script on the helmet, and Teddy did one as well. I'd kind of like to do that because it's hot right now. It's something that's happening, but I don't know if it works or not. I don't like Pete on the helmet, honestly. I did one mock-up one time where it was huge, kind of like the Goldie, the Gopher. It's too much for me. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm big on Pete being on the helmets or not, but I've tried it. I've experimented. Jim Garfinkel says, are we surprised at the predictions and analysis of the Boilers season's recruiting? It's all haterade. Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit, Jim. You missed the story. I talked about there's one prediction out there, one of the magazines that had Purdue winning 5 games. And I thought that's the most level-headed of all of them because many people have Purdue finishing with 2 or 3 wins, which I don't think is accurate. On one hand, you've got the transfer portal success has been great for Walters. The recruiting success has been, I'd say, bumped up a little bit from where Brom was, definitely bumped up from where it was the eras before that. So it looks like there's talent in the pipeline. The problem is you have that. And on the other side, you have the attrition, a lot of loss of people and people in key positions. So, but there's a lot of people out there, they just don't watch Purdue football. So they kind of are speaking out of order. And I think they're wrong. Like I said, the tough schedule puts Purdue in a position where getting to 6 wins is difficult to me, but getting to 3 or 4 should be a gimme, right? If you look at the schedule, I think there are 3 or 4. I saw an analysis from one guy he broke down percentage of why I think Purdue's wins. It was based on some Vegas thing. And he had Purdue at 4 wins. I have Purdue at 4 to 6 wins. I think 5 is probably it. It's weird. 5 wins would be a pretty good season. So Greg Manis says Gate, STX. Yeah, I tried to get STX as a client. I actually went to their headquarters. Used to be in Baltimore one time, Greg. But I couldn't get it done. This is back when, this is 15 years ago. Greg Manis says, or the half helmet. No, I didn't do the half helmet. No. Let's see. Greg Manis says Cascade, best helmets out there. Yeah. And the funny thing is, Greg, you know this, they don't change their shells very often because the mold is so expensive. This is back in the early 2000s. I designed one of the first new shells. And I also designed stuff in baseball for Wilson and DeMarini, some protective stuff. But yeah, that's fun. That's fun project work, especially when you're like me. I didn't play lacrosse, so it takes a lot of research to understand the consumer and get to really know what they need, what they want. So you're talking to players and you're trying to figure out how to do it. So yeah, I think it's the best part about being a designer is solving a problem. And so, yeah, that was really, really fun stuff. So, and that's about it. That is not a QuickCast at all. It's 45 minutes, 46 minutes right now. Thank you to all of you for tuning in, for staying tuned in. If you're still here, God bless you. Hope you're tuning in regularly via the Believe Network. I don't give a tip of a hat to them very often, but the Believe Network is the audio side of things. So do appreciate your time, and hope you have a great day. And I hope you get outside and enjoy the nice weather. It's going to be a good one. God bless you. Hammer down. Talk to you soon. Boilers have new uniforms.